Have you ever asked yourself, was Yahweh only known to Israel? Or could it be that his name, presence, and worship reached people long before the nation of Israel even existed? Think about it. Before Moses stood on Mount Sinai, before the Ten Commandments were written, even before Jacob became Israel, people were already whispering the name of Yahweh. So who were these early people who knew him? How did they come to worship the God we now associate with Israel? And what does this reveal about God's greater plan for humanity? A plan that goes far beyond national borders and timelines. This is the mystery of worshiping Yahweh before Israel. And what you're about to uncover might change the way you read the Bible forever. But before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your questions might even inspire a future video. Let's start at the core of it all. Who is Yahweh? You probably remember the powerful moment in Exodus 3. Moses stands before the burning bush, unsure and full of questions. He asks, "What is your name?" And God answers with those unforgettable words, "I am who I am." Then God says, "Tell the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you." Pause for a second. Did you catch that? The God of your ancestors. This wasn't the first time anyone had heard of Yahweh. His name, rooted in the Hebrew verb for to be, points to a God who was, is, and always will be. But here's where it gets really interesting. Yahweh's name didn't first appear at the burning bush. People already knew it before Moses ever set foot on holy ground. Surprised? You're not alone. Let's go way back to Genesis. Yahweh's name appears as early as Genesis 4:26, where it says people began to call on the name of the Lord. The Hebrew word there is YHWH, Yahweh. This was during the time of Enosh, Adam's grandson. Just a few generations after creation, people were already calling on Yahweh's name. So how did they know his name? Who taught them? Could it be that God was revealing himself to all who truly sought him, even then? Jump ahead to Abraham. When he arrived in Canaan, he built an altar and called on Yahweh by name. He wasn't encountering a new deity. This was a God already known within his family line. Could it be that worship of Yahweh had been passed down, even through generations touched by idolatry? This tells us something powerful. God was never absent. He was always reaching out, always calling, and there were always people who responded, long before Israel became a nation. Let's go deeper. In Genesis 14, a mysterious figure appears, Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He brings out bread and wine and blesses Abraham, and Abraham gives him 1/10 of everything. Who was this priest who served Yahweh before Moses, before the law, before the Levitical priesthood? Hebrews 7 tells us Melchizedek had no recorded ancestry, no beginning or end, and some scholars believe he foreshadowed Christ. Either way, he proves that worship of Yahweh was alive even outside Abraham's family. But Melchizedek isn't the only example. There's Jethro, Moses' father-in-law and priest of Midian. He wasn't an Israelite, yet Exodus 18 says he rejoiced over what Yahweh had done for Israel and declared, "Now I know Yahweh is greater than all other gods." He even offered sacrifices to God and shared a sacred meal with Moses and the elders of Israel. Clearly, he was already worshiping Yahweh and was welcomed, not corrected. What does this show us? That God was at work beyond Israel's borders. He was known, worshipped, and revealing himself to people in distant places who sought the truth. Now here's another mind-blowing point. The book of Job, possibly the oldest book in the Bible, centers on someone who wasn't an Israelite. Job lived far from Canaan, yet his entire story is about his relationship with God. He says, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, Yahweh." He also declares, "I know that my Redeemer lives." That's personal, profound faith. Even Job's friends wrestled with big moral and spiritual questions. This shows that the knowledge of Yahweh wasn't limited to Israel. It was known and discussed throughout the ancient world, and that makes sense. God created all people, not just one nation. As Romans 1:19-20 reminds us, God's nature has been clearly seen through creation since the very beginning. Whether we look at Job, Melchizedek, Jethro, or Abraham, one truth stands out. God was revealing himself, and people were responding, even outside the borders of Israel. So, what does this mean for us today? Now here's someone who really challenges what we expect. Balaam. He's one of the most mysterious figures in the Bible, a man from outside of Israel, with questionable intentions, yet somehow he hears directly from Yahweh. Let's take a closer look. In Numbers, it says, God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" Did you catch that? God came to Balaam, not through a dream or a vague sign, but in an actual conversation, just like he did with Abraham, Moses, and the prophets. Then Balaam says in verse 13, "Go back to your own country, for Yahweh has refused to let me go with you." He uses the personal covenant name, Yahweh, not just God, or El, or Elohim, but YHWH, the sacred name revealed to Moses at the burning bush. That's huge. So how did Balaam know Yahweh's voice? How did he recognize it so clearly that he obeyed him, at least at first? And why would Yahweh speak to someone who wasn't part of his covenant people? These are deep and surprising questions, but they point to something profound. God was already revealing himself far beyond the borders of Israel. His name, his voice, his power, they were known even to Gentiles. Now it's important to say, Balaam wasn't righteous. As we learn later in 2 Peter and Revelation, he was prideful, greedy, and spiritually compromised. But despite that, he was spiritually aware, and God still chose to speak to him. When King Balak hires Balaam to curse Israel, God flips the script. Instead of cursing, Balaam ends up speaking blessing after blessing over Israel. He says, "How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom Yahweh has not denounced?" Numbers. Then, Balaam proclaims one of the most beautiful prophetic visions in the Old Testament. "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel." That's a clear messianic prophecy, pointing directly to Jesus. Yes, Balaam was flawed. Yes, his story is messy. But it reveals something powerful. Yahweh's voice isn't confined by geography, bloodline, or human plans. Even when people try to use God for their own gain, his purposes still stand. Balaam's story shows us that God has always had a global mission. He was revealing himself long before Israel existed, and he still is. So why does all this matter? Why should it matter that Yahweh was known by people like Job, Melchizedek, Jethro, and Balaam long before the nation of Israel ever formed? Because it reminds us of a deep truth. God's heart has always been for the whole world, not just one tribe, not just one people. From the very beginning, Yahweh has been making himself known to anyone who truly seeks him. From the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of Yahweh is to be praised. Psalm 113, verse 3. Even in remote places, even in silence, he was moving, speaking, calling, long before commandments were written in stone. This means his story is so much bigger than we often realize. And the incredible part, you are part of that story. Maybe you felt like an outsider, like you don't come from the right background. Maybe religion seemed distant, or you never learned the traditions. But here's the truth. God sees you. He's been reaching for you long before you ever reached for him. Just like he walked with Enoch. Just like he called Abraham out of a pagan land. Just like he revealed himself to Job. He's calling you. And the beauty of the gospel is this. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Romans 10:13. That name is Yahweh. And in the New Testament, that name is revealed in his Son, Yeshua, Jesus, which means Yahweh saves. So the question is, what will you do with this mystery? Will you seek him, even if you're outside the expected places? Will you listen for his voice like so many did before Israel ever existed? Will you respond to the God who's been reaching across generations and nations to find you? If this message stirred something in your heart, let us know in the comments. What surprised you most? What questions do you still have? We'd love to hear your thoughts and walk this journey with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know that God's love reaches farther than we ever imagined. Thanks for joining us today as we explored one of the Bible's most overlooked truths, the mystery of Yahweh's worship before Israel.